Hi Not Board Gamers and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the solo experience of Resident Evil, the board game from Steamforged Games. Now it is the third Resident Evil board game that Steamforged have released. First was Resident Evil 2, then was Resident Evil 3, and now they've released Resident Evil. Now, I never played Resident Evil 2. I did have and backed Resident Evil 3. And for whatever reason, it just didn't quite strike a chord with me. I tried it a number of times and I just didn't get a compelling feeling from the game. However, Steamforged were very kind to send me over a review copy of Resident Evil, and I have been playing this a fair bit. And let me tell you, it's kind of turned the corner on what my thoughts are on the Resident Evil board game. Still, still a couple of niggles and a couple of issues, but in reality, I'm having a lot of fun playing Resident Evil the board game, I say, from Steamforged Games, and this is a retail version that you can get. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to delve into gameplay. So, what is Resident Evil? Well, you play STARS agents, and if you know the board and you know the video game, then you know that you are one of the STARS agents, be that Jill Valentine, be that Chris Redfield, or one of the many others, basically. And there's been an outbreak in Raccoon City, and you're trying to find the source of it, and you've holed up in this mansion, and you're kind of stuck in this mansion fighting off zombies and zombie dogs and bad guys, etc., working your way through the mansion, finding items, exploring rooms, solving puzzles, trying to get to the helipad. And the game is played over a number of scenarios. You see, it is a campaign-style game, but it's not totally campaign. You can play it as one-offs, and in the rulebook and the scenario book, it gives you, in the scenario book, it gives you indications on what to do and how to set the game up if you want to play a specific scenario as a standalone game. Now, it's a dungeon crawler. You're effectively going to be moving through rooms and corridors, fighting off bad guys, opening doors, new rooms are going to get unveiled, new bad guys are going to come out after you. So, it is a dungeon crawl in what it does. And I must admit, it's really hitting the spot for me. It's doing it very, very well. Now, I didn't think that would happen. I'm not saying Resident Evil 3 was a bad game. I think it was probably a good game, and I know a lot of people absolutely love it. There's a big community for the Resident Evil games out there. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't make it stick with me, and I ended up moving it on. But I'm really pleased that they sent me through a copy of obviously, Resident Evil, the first board game. So, as a dungeon crawler, as you know, in dungeon crawlers, you're going to play one or two characters. You can play it solo, true solo, and it does tell you what to do in the instruction in the scenario books for true solo, but I always tend to prefer playing two characters. And why is that? Because you get a different kind of sense of interplay between the two, and kind of using each other's skills and abilities and what you collected, etc., together to complete each scenario. And you're going to make your way through these tiles that are laid out. So each scenario has its own layout of tiles, and there will be some gaps in there that may or may not get filled in a little bit later in the game as you start unlocking doors, etc. And through a series of turns, until your threat deck runs out or you die, then what's going to happen is that you're going to try and move through these rooms. You're going to fight the bad guys, and as I say, be they zombies or be they the big bads or zombie dogs, etc. You're going to fight the bad guys using a number of dice, and that's right, it is a dice-based game. There's also collection involved. You're going to collect various items, and which are going to be of help to you, so things like herbs and additional weapons and certain items that you need to complete certain rooms. And that is really key as you play it as a campaign, is that you may get to a particular part or start unlocking the map a little bit further, but where you want to go next is locked, and you've got to go back into the rooms that you haven't done and potentially find an object there, which is going to allow you then to move on and continue the adventure. And it's sprawling. In reality, you're never going to play in one campaign. You're never going to play all of the rooms and all of the scenarios, because you will take a slightly different path each and every time you take it. Now, on your turn, you're going to take up to 4 actions, and your actions are going to be move, so you can move your characters from one square to the next. They're going to be an attack, so depending on what weapon you've got, and each weapon has one of these little dials on here which counts the kind of ammunition that's on there. You're going to attack with a weapon in your inventory. You're going to open or close a door. That can be really, really useful. Obviously, opening doors gives you new areas to move into, but closing doors can stop zombies from moving into your area, and that can be really useful. You can search, so if you're next to a token or on a token, they can search one of the item decks that's on there and see what cards you get from that. You can trade if you wanted to with a character in the same space. You can use an item, so that is classed as an action on here, and those are kind of the number of different actions. As I say, you're going to take 4 of them on any turn. You can repeat actions, so you could shoot, 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 and shoot, or you can move, 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 and move. You may not want to shoot, 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 and shoot, though, because every time you shoot, what's going to happen is going to be a reaction from the, or not in the reaction phase, there's going to be a response from the zombies that are on your tiles or on tiles connected to it, and they're going to start moving to you. Then you get into the reaction phase. So you resolve reaction then for every enemy that's kind of on your board, and each enemy has a slightly different card. So if we look here, we can see the Cerebrus card. There we go. That's pulling up all right. And it tells you various things on there, how far they move, what their health is, when they're going to attack you. An attack can happen. They have like a basic attack, but if you your top card that you've turned over on your threat deck has a symbol on there. There you go. This one's got a symbol on the bottom. You can see that on there, just down at the bottom there, that's a symbol. That can initiate a different type of attack for them, and also depending on what your threat is at as well. So you have a little threat dial here, which is going to rack up as the game goes on, and that gets into certain icons, which will then potentially trigger other attacks. So in the reaction phase, what's going to happen is you resolve an action for any enemy on the same or linked tiles. So they maybe move towards you. Maybe they're going to attack you. Maybe they're going to do something else. Who knows? If a character is in range and in line of sight, the enemy will perform an attack. If the enemy model is not in range to attack, it will move towards the closest character. So you get this sense of creeping dread as they're all kind of moving towards you. And then you go to the tension phase, where you're going to turn cards over from the tension deck. And that what happens is that effectively acts as a timer, but also can introduce some rather nasty stuff happening in there as well. And you've got a number of decks of cards in the game. So you have the tension deck that we've spoken about. You have the encounter cards, which is these things here. And what happens is, depending on certain points in the game, you're going to start pulling off these encounter cards, or pulling out these encounter cards. They're going to make things, generally bad things, happen to you. You have some item decks. You have A, B, and C item decks. Some of them are bespoke to each scenario. Some of them are just going to kind of grow throughout the game as well, and you're going to add stuff to there. And down at the bottom here, you've got some narrative cards. So you're going to have narrative actions which may happen. You're going to have some mission cards. So you have these mission cards here. Now what happens with your mission cards is that you have some reserve characters, and they're going to carry out some of your missions down there. And here's some of the reserve characters here. Okay, and then you have these cards, which are kind of exploration cards, and these are the ones that when you get to a particular point in a scenario, you read the relevant card, and it potentially adds new maps to the tile and new bad guys to the tile, etc. So the game is constantly evolving as you play it, and I think that's a really interesting mechanism that we've got here. At its heart, it is a kind of it is a dungeon crawler. It doesn't do anything massively innovative, if you like. So if you're looking for a game which is really pushing the boundaries of innovation, then maybe Resident Evil isn't that, but that's not what every game has to be. Sure, some of it feels kind of, like bespoke to it. I do like these little weapon dials. I do like these additional decks of cards with the missions and the narrative events and the exploration that kind of open the map up in front of you. So, but again, not massively innovative, and I don't think anything in Resident Evil is massively innovative, but that is possibly to its advantage rather than its detriment. You see, as well as appealing to board gamers, the game has obviously got to appeal to video gamers who may want to play the game. And this is where we sometimes as board gamers come at things slightly different. We want more crunch, we want more innovation in there. But when a big part of your market is going to be video gamers who are going to be playing this, you want to make it accessible as well without losing your core kind of your core board gaming audience. And I think that's what they managed to do with Resident Evil, the board game. It feels like if you played dungeon crawlers before, if you played adventure games before, then it feels like you know exactly how this is going to play. And that's not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, each scenario is going to be different and the challenges are going to be different. The early ones start off maybe a little bit easier, but as you start exploring, going to some of the other floors in the mansion, etc., and you start unlocking other areas, and then some of these main bad guys start coming after you, it starts to get more and more difficult. And it is possible to fail a scenario, and that's okay, because you can, whilst not failing forward, you can redo it again, or you can go and try another scenario to kind of beef up your characters to get back to that scenario as well. So the game is constantly pushing you forward, if you like, trying to get you to complete the campaign. And I think that is a really important thing. There's so many campaigns out there which potentially run out of steam before you get to the end of them. That's not necessarily the case in Resident Evil, the board game, because you can play them as one-off scenarios, because you can, whilst not retracing your steps, you can go back and try some of the scenarios that you've not been successful on. You still get that opportunity. Now, when you complete the scenario, you can't go back and replay that scenario in your campaign. You can replay it as a one-shot, but you can't go back and play it in your campaign. You're kind of done there. Now, there is a large exploration element in this game, and that is going to kind of potentially either sway or dissuade some people from it as well. Because, as I say, there are certain areas that you cannot go until you've got certain items, and you're going to have to explore other areas to go back into that area to get that item. So therefore, it opens up multiple paths for you, which is all part of kind of how the mansion is laid out. But that can be, you know, a little bit frustrating for people at the same time. If you think, well, I've completed that, I want to go to the next room there, that's really where I want to go. Oh no, I've got to step back a level and go and fight one of these easy rooms so I can get whatever it is from that easy room and go over there. And I understand that that may not work for everybody as well. Now, a big part of the actual gameplay is obviously rolling dice. So you have a number of dice, and they're based on, or the weapons that you've got based on what dice that you actually roll. And each die has a number of faces on there with various kind of icons on there. So 6 faces on a 6 face die, D6 obviously. Now some of them are evade, which are these kind of little circular arrows that you can see here, and some of them are hit. Now, how many dice you roll is generally dependent on kind of what weapon you got and how many times, how many bullets you can roll for it. Some of them will allow you to shoot just once, but if you've got a rapid fire symbol on there, then you can spend another bullet and roll another dice for it, so you can increase your chances. But the dice are punishing, and it's perfectly feasible to, when you're trying to do combat, that you roll 0, you miss completely. That just feels, you know, in a game like this, that can be really key and pivotal. It's very difficult to get killed in one blow from the bad guys, but it makes the game significantly harder for you. So having that balance of kind of how much ammo have I got, where's the next ammo cache I can get to, you know, and that's going to dictate how many dice I want to roll, how fast I go through that. Also on the dice as well, there's this symbol, and if you roll that symbol, it doesn't damage the zombies, it pushes them back, which can be very, very useful. But when you're looking to deliver a final blow and that rolls up, it's like, oh my god. And that's why you get this balance of kind of mitigating how many you're going to roll and how much ammunition that you've got. So, you know, do bear in mind it is a dice-based game. That is for combat, and that is also for evasion as well. So when you're trying to get out of the range of the bad guys, or trying to get out of the way of the bad guys. So if dice things aren't your forte, and you like something, you know, with potentially some kind of luck mitigation, I mean, you know, it's slightly there in the mechanisms, but, you know, something other than dice, then maybe Resident Evil isn't for you. I think that... That's a new shirt. I think that... yeah, I think the dice isn't for everybody. It would be nice to see some alternative to dice. You know, like doing Oathsworn, where you can use the dice or you can use the cards to kind of balance the game how you want to play. Having a dual mechanism might be good here, rather than the really old school way of just relying on D6 dice. But it's not the end of the world at the same time, but you do use dice a lot for it. So, overall, I'm really enjoying my time with Resident Evil. I'm not a huge follower of the IP. I'm aware of it. I've obviously played quite a few of the games, but I'm not a huge follower of the IP. However, I think that for people who do like the IP, then there is a lot here for people to like. There are still some issues, as I say. It does nothing massively innovative. You know, it stands on the shoulders of almost every dungeon crawler adventure type game that comes before it, and it wears that proudly on its sleeve as well. You know, right from the first game, there was an issue with the darkness on some of the tiles. So on Resident Evil 2, then on Resident Evil 3, and it's still the same on Resident Evil. These door tiles that you get where one side is shut and one side is open. They're not the best illustrated. They're still very, very dark. Once you play the game, you get used to it. It's not the end of the world to have them like that. But still, even so, you know, you'd think after 3 games in that Steamforged would have come up with a slightly better solution than this. Of course, if you've got the Kickstarter version, then you've got access to all of the minis. Now, that's another thing as well. The retail version has an entire campaign in there with enough to replay and replay. But if you really like this, then you're going to have to buy a lot of the extras. The Kickstarter version has a bog standard insert in it, and quite frankly, it's more of a pain in the backside than anything. I'm not seeing the Kickstarter insert, but if it's anything like the Resident Evil 3 Kickstarter insert that I had, then that was fantastic and really good for the job. Not so much in Resident Evil, and you're going to have to get some baggies to start storing things in. So, you know, it may well be that ultimately you end up throwing the inside out and just keeping the stuff in baggies, which is a bit of a shame, but I get it because it's a pretty packed box. There's lots of these kind of variant room tiles that have to go somewhere, and, you know, without going full Tetris and kind of place them into the box in the optimal position, you know, you're just going to end up chucking stuff in baggies, which is a bit of a shame. But I get it. It's for retail. I say if you've got the Kickstarter, then there's the inserts there. And there's all of the expansion stuff as well. I don't know if any of it was Kickstarter exclusive, and I'm sure you can pick some of it up in retail. I would say if you're going for the retail version of the game, don't go full hog. Just hold back, buy the base game, make sure you like the base game, then start adding to it. I like it, you know, enough to play the base game and probably play the base game through the entire campaign, and then I'd be happy to play it with somebody else. But I don't know if, for me, I like it enough to then start thinking, oh, I need X expansion for it, or I need Y expansion for it. So yeah, just be wary when you're buying stuff. So as I say, kind of the plus points are for it is that if you played Dungeon Crawlers before, you're going to know roughly how this plays, and that's not a bad thing. It captures the atmosphere and the elements of kind of a Resident Evil film really, a Resident Evil game, should I say, not films, they're dreadful. Resident Evil game really well, and you do get this sense of impending dread as the zombie hordes start getting bigger and other ones come out onto the map and they start coming after you because, as I say, you make noises, you shoot, etc. They're going to move towards you. At the end of their reaction phase, if they're on your tile or connected tile, they're going to move towards you. So you're constantly planning to stay one step ahead of the game, and that's a really nice kind of tactical element to it to understand where you're going to go. I love the fact that the scenarios play out, or the structure and how you play through the scenarios will change or could change every time you play it, and I think that's fantastic as well. Is it gives you enough kind of variability here that if you like the experience enough, you can go back into it. And I really like the fact that that you can play them as one shots. Now, I'm a big fan of dice games, of dice-based games. I love an element of luck, so therefore that's really good for me. I say it would have been better had they offered another mitigation system like cards to kind of counteract that. But I'm happy with dice, but dice aren't going to be for everybody. On why it may not be for you, well, first of all, let's talk about these tiles. As I say, some of them are still quite dark. Now, the rest of the tiles are fine. Very generic, I think, in the artwork on there. And as much as, you know, if you know the IP, you're going to kind of buy into what's happening. It just doesn't feel, because it's so dark, it doesn't feel like it pops off the table, which is a bit of a shame. As I mentioned, the kind of the gameplay, by not being innovative, could just be the reason that people don't want to get it. You want to try something new in your experience. There's nothing wrong with that in your dungeon crawling experience, and this does not offer anything potentially new, but what it does do, it does it very well. But that's not going to be for everybody. Rulebook wise, a bit of a strange layout. It's easy to learn the game because it takes you through a tutorial, then tells you how to set the campaign up, which is great. The issue being is that not everybody's going to play this all the time. And when you don't play it all the time, you may have it off your table for 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe a couple of months. And then when you go back up to reset your campaign, because there's in the retail version, there's no real brilliant storage system to actually do to sort things out. And because of how the rulebook's laid out with this tutorial and then giving you additional rules, it just misses that kind of one central thing, right? If you're coming back to this game after, after a time away, then this is everything you need to set out as you need to set it out. some things will be slightly different, like the item decks, because they vary, or some of them vary on per scenario. But yeah, I put it away for 3 weeks, and then I got it back out to play a couple of games. I mean, it just took me a little bit longer than I really wanted it to remember what I needed to do to set the game up. If you play it constantly, not an issue. If you keep dipping in and out of it, then yeah, that could be an issue. And you know, I'm getting on now. I'm kind of 53. My memory's not as good as it was. Components-wise, absolutely fine. I say apart from the darkness on the art, the fact it doesn't pop, the miniatures are fine. And in terms of replayability, there is plenty there. But it certainly won't be for everybody, given the nature of how the game is set out, the fact it's trying to please, obviously, lovers of the IP of the video game and lovers of board games, etc. Two slightly different camps. It's set up somewhere in the middle to provide that level of challenge, but also a level of accessibility. So, I say, kind of rounding things up then, my final thoughts on Resident Evil, the board game. I'm having a lot of fun with this. I enjoy setting it up. I feel atmospheric. I feel the kind of the pressure of the hordes that are coming for me, and I kind of like it a lot. Maybe because of, not in spite of, the fact that it's not massively innovative, and that's good. Sometimes, you know, I'm learning new rule sets all the time for various games, and sometimes, yeah, it just gets a lot to try and learn a lot of rule sets. This kind of, you know, because it is something that's by and large been done before, you know, you will drop straight into. But that could be a dissuader for some people as well, in the fact that, yeah, it's, you know, the innovation isn't there. It is a rote kind of dungeon crawler by and large. Some nice little touches, nice little flourishes, but by and large, it's not massively innovative, but that works for me. Gameplay-wise, I'm enjoying it. Each session is going to take around about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to do a scenario, and the fact that you effectively fail sideways or forward rather than just fail outright is a really good thing. And you can increase the challenge on the game as well. So if you find it too easy, if you're a seasoned dungeon crawler and you find it too easy, you can increase the challenge on the game. I like the exploration effect in the mansion. The fact that you've got to sometimes, you know, you get to a point you can't go any further till you go back and complete another scenario and then go back to that. That's not going to be for everybody. Some people prefer a linear approach to it. And as I mentioned already, dice kind of are the major drivers of this game for your combat and for your evasion. And if you don't like pure dice-based gameplay, and there's no other kind of way of doing it, there's no decks of cards for the dice, etc., then it's not going to be for you. So be wary of that you may want to kind of have a proclivity to like dice in your gameplay. So I do know that there's some innovation in their next Resident Evil game, which I believe is Resident Evil 4, that they're doing. There is, which is obviously a much loved part of the franchise in terms of video games. There is some innovation coming in that, so I'm really going to be keeping a close eye on Resident Evil 4. But as for now, I say I played 3, didn't quite grab me, haven't played 2. Resident Evil, for me, it's one of the most fun experiences I've had this year, and certainly from a dungeon crawler that knows exactly what it is, that wears its kind of it's kind of homage on its sleeve, doesn't overcomplicate things, just provides some kind of great core gameplay that you want in an accessible format. I'm really enjoying it. Won't be for everybody, but for me, I think what Steamforged has done here hits that nail on the head of just being accessible, fun, not too deep, with a lot of replayability as well. So yeah, there we go. That's my kind of review of the solo experience of Resident Evil, the board game from Steamforged Games. I like it a lot. Won't be for everybody, and I absolutely understand why it won't be for everybody. But in terms of scratching that itch, where you want something and you want to play, you know, a scenario or a dungeon crawling scenario, then it's relatively quick to get to the table, despite the awful insert, relatively quick to get to the table, and it plays really, really nice. Now, I know what I wanted to show you. If you ever saw my kind of unboxing on Resident Evil 3, they had like a paper mat that you kind of tracked the campaign on, which I absolutely hated. I thought it was awful. Now for Resident Evil the board game, it's now card. Not only card, but you've got this kind of moving zombie image on there as well, which is really cool. And I really like that. I shouted quite a lot of my unboxing video of Resident Evil 3, the board game, because of the awful paper mat. They've listened, I'm sure it wasn't they listened to me, but they've listened to people, and we now have this kind of 3D effect zombie moving for you, which kind of is your mat to put your cards on. So that's a really nice addition. That's in the retail version. So yes, thank you very much for watching me on this kind of quick run through Resident Evil, the board game from Steamforged Games. I think it's available in retail now. Yeah, I like it. Won't be for everybody, but for me, it's one of the games I've played probably the most this year. So thank you very much for watching me. My name is Mark. This is Not Board Gaming. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos. And one final thought. If you can't find anyone else to play with, then there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.